Welcome everyone to today's session. Very excited to have Chris Brasel with us. He is the Director of Military and Veteran Services here on campus. Chris has a long background not only working in this field, but also supporting students in this way. And having him at a recent meeting, I think it was last semester or 2 semesters ago, Chris, where you were sharing with our staff about your office and how you support students. It was just so meaningful. I wanted to invite him to do this session with everyone. So, Chris, thank you so much for being here. I'm very excited to have you present on this today.
Pleasure. I'm very excited to be here. Is everybody able to hear me okay? Those on camera? Okay, awesome. It's been a minute since I've taken a Zoom call from the house. So today's my work from home day. So I had to bring all this equipment out of storage here, basically. So very excited and very happy to have this opportunity to be here today and talk about this subject. This is something I've been doing for about 10 years now here at the university. So I've pretty much worked in every role within the Military and Veteran Services Office, is what it's called now. Back in the day, Veteran Service Office. And then if some of y'all have been here for over 10 years, it used to be Veteran Student Services Office back 13 years ago when they first opened this place up. So today's session, I'm really kind of focusing on what we can do for our student veterans specifically. There are some slides later down in here that go into how our military affiliated students are split up here at the university. But the main point of today's session really focuses on veterans and recently transitioned out service members. So again, thanks for being here, and I'll go ahead and get started here on the slides. So I just wanted to give everybody a opportunity to see the faces of our office. Staff has grown a little bit. We have added Elizabeth Beatty, who is our program director for outreach and engagement within the last year and a half. So I see a lot of familiar faces. Some of y'all have probably worked with her at some point. Elizabeth's job is to go around the state and soon, hopefully, outside of the state to visit our military installations here in North Carolina and try to help recruit those transitioning service members to become students here at Charlotte. So I will give you a little bit of extra background information. We are the fastest growing military affiliated population within the state. We closed the gap by 37 students with ECU this semester. I will also tell you ECU cheats. So their number is higher than it really is because of their online programs that they offer with VA certifications right now. So they're sitting at a little over 2,000, and we're by VA standards at 1,800. So we're closing that gap. We're beating Chapel Hill, we're beating State, we're crushing everyone else. So we're doing a lot of great work here at the university. We have almost doubled our population in 13 years. So the data I have, you'll see on a chart later, it was 799, and the numbers I ran this week were 1599. So I need one more student to hit that 1,600 number. Tyler Thomas is my program manager. He focuses on our student programming, our student orgs. So we have two student orgs that are affiliated with our office, our Student Veterans of America chapter. So it's a national org. They're very involved with legislation when it comes to GI Bill. And then the Military Women's Alliance, which is a new org that launched in the last year or so. Delicia Ofikulu and Nyesha Hicks are our VA certifying officials. So they're the actual people that do all the work in my office and process all the money. So they're doing all the hard work of the VA certifications, talking to those students, troubleshooting things for them. Later in this presentation, we'll cover a little bit about benefits and financial impacts. So this is the office here. Everybody, other than Nyesha, is an alum. So we've all gotten at least one degree at the university. And everybody but Elizabeth is a veteran on the team. And I was kind of tried to be intentional and collected one of each. So it's almost like the Infinity Stones and Thanos' gauntlet. We have one of every branch. So you walk in our office, unless you're Space Force, you'll have somebody that can relate to your service story. So starting off a little bit, you'll hear me kind of switch a little bit around with terminology. Dependent is VA terminology. We try to use military affiliated because dependent kind of focuses in just on children and spouses. And there's a lot of people that are inside the bubble that maybe don't fall into those two categories. So, the draft ended in the 70s. We have a lot less people or a lot less direct connection to military service. So, a lot of folks have grandparents that served or an uncle or something like that. And so we still want to include those folks in our programming and our services. So we try to use that terminology, military affiliated. Another thing that happened in the last 10 years is our ratio of dependents to veteran students has flip-flopped. So if you look back at the early data, it was much more veteran heavy. And now, with better access to VA healthcare, people are getting better ratings. There are more folks that are education benefits are opened up to them. So I have much more of that military affiliated population than actual student veterans themselves. Both populations have grown and are increasing still, but that ratio between those two populations has shifted a little bit. So you can see here on the left-hand side, that's our Military Women's Alliance. Then the middle is our Top Golf outing. That's our most popular event every year. We do it during Veterans Week programming. Open it up to families. People bring their kids. So we do food and sponsor a couple of lanes for them. It's always a big hit. It's just so expensive and it makes me cry every year. I have to reconcile that receipt. So thank you to Topgolf. And then there's Tyler with our SVA cohort. We try to sponsor and send them to the national convention once a year where they can do some networking, but basically also get involved in things like legislation and the legal side of VA education benefits. So I don't want to bore everybody, but I'm a big context guy. I think I saw Mark Sanders in here. He was one of my professors when I was getting my degree. And I think he had a comment on one of my papers I wrote where it was just too much context. I'll go way too into detail about everything without answering the question sometimes. But I wanted to throw a little bit in here about the GI Bill. So it's gone through a lot of different changes. We're probably, I think, on the third or fourth version of it now. And the slang is the GI Bill, but each of these bills has a different name. So the original one that we all think of was coming out of World War II in 1944. And it was to address the changes that veterans had big complaints of coming out of World War One. So they didn't think the benefits were comprehensive enough. And there was a lot of want and need from that population to go into higher education, basically. So there was a shift from just the employment opportunities to opening up some educational opportunities. We had, a big economic impact of that post-war, right? You had more college graduates, better jobs, people buying homes. So there's a lot of, downstream impacts of things with GI Bill education benefits. 1956, 7.8 million veterans had used the GI Bill. 2.2 of that in higher ed. So a lot of that was vocational training, which GI Bill still covers today. So things like, welding school, HVAC, there are small business classes and certifications you can get. So there's quite a lot of different options, but, since we're a university here, this is what we push out to our students. The Montgomery came out in 1984, post-Vietnam. So that was, what we were using up until post 9/11. So post 9/11 is, a lot of people have heard about that. It didn't actually, come into effect until 2008. So it took about 7 years once that conflict popped off for an update for that education benefit. Just briefly, I'll go into it a little bit later, but post 9/11 is very comprehensive. It pays all in-state tuition and fees. It pays the student a housing allowance so they can try to not work while they're going to school and focus on education. And it does pay for a textbook stipend. So it is possible to completely live off of that education benefit post-service.
Hey,
So a little
Chris.
bit.
Sorry to
Yes.
interrupt. Your voice is going in and out just a little bit. I don't
Okay.
know if you're using headsets or
No, it's just my mic is, I was trying to keep it out of the frame. Is this better?
no, it's okay. Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. I'll just get it a little closer there.
That's perfect. Thank you.
All right. Um, so going into the history of the college, there is that military history to it, right? So Bonnie Cone, September 23rd, 1946, started off as the Charlotte Center as a night school to offer those evening classes to our returning World War II veterans. And then eventually ended up turning into a 2-year institution and then accepted into the North Carolina Community College system, then a 4-year, and then now who we are today. So a lot of that history, and we owe it to the GI Bill, basically, of this institution. So we're young, us and UNC Wilmington are both post World War II schools. And so a lot of that goes back to that military service and that military population. Going back to that first class, that's a picture I found out of the archives up there on the top left. 200 of the original 278 students were veterans out of the, post World War II. So today, I have 650 veterans, active duty, and reservists on campus. So look at that ratio of 200 to 278 and 650 to our, that was the number undergrad admissions put out, 32,207. I think we picked up a few since then. But those ratios have kind of shifted. Today, our student veterans, they're really seeking career opportunities, in high paying fields. Most of our students are junior enlisted, so they spent 4 years being paid a very low wage in the military. So they know, hey, I'm going to get a good quality college education and I want to go into a high paying field. So college engineering is our biggest. Everybody wants to be an engineer right now. A lot of nursing and health and kinesiology is pretty big in our population. And then Belk College of Business is the third amongst most popular for our veteran students. So we do track those metrics. We try to work with employers that are friendly in those spaces. And we try to offer a lot of opportunity, in connection with places like the Career Center and other colleges around campus. I'll talk a little bit about it later, but the current generation of college student is very young, coming with that military service. There has been a shift in who we see as a student veteran. So I was probably one of the tail end of the global war on terror cohort, basically. And so we were older. We had done longer than usually 4 years for most people. So we were coming to college in our early 30s, whereas this current cohort is joining at 18, getting out at 22, and then starting college up immediately. So they're young. A lot of them don't have families. They're not in relationships. So they're integrating better with our general student population here on campus. So that's a picture of Hope Williams, one of my favorite students that we had. She was a reservist, got activated during COVID actually, and went and did a COVID support mission for a year and switched to fully online classes while she did that. So stayed using her benefits, stayed connected to the university while being deployed, and then came back and had accumulated enough time active duty wise to switch over to the GI Bill and use her post 9/11. So, she was featured, Niner Insider. That's where I stole this photo from. But, just a very high performing student, incredibly smart, really hardworking. And that's a good representation of our student population. So going back to GWOT, Global War on Terror, technically it ended in 2021. We had about 2 to 3 million service people served during that time period. But today, those students that we're having they joined during COVID, so about 2020. And so their military experience is also completely different than the rest of us. Much less deployment history. You'll see extremely less likely to be a combat deployment those. The pullout in Afghanistan, we have a few students that were involved in that, but really the history and the experience of like being in combat is less likely to happen with our students right now. Again, they're younger and better connected to their peers. I noticed over the last couple of years, I go to orientation and they just look a little bit older and have a little bit more money than our regular first time in college students. That's all it was. And the shift from affliction t-shirts and combat boots to, looking like extras from Yellowstone has happened. And so that's what it looks like every time I walk into an orientation session, just a bunch of cowboys. And I'm like, where's the horses? Why are we wearing these hats? That's just my thing. So less desire to be in that space with other veterans and complain about things like my generation of veteran, and more want to be integrated with general campus. So, they're excited about football. A lot of them went to the game yesterday. They want to go to these events and go to the Career Center resource fairs and recruiting fairs. So it's a very nice and exciting shift, but a lot of extra work on our office to shift the direction we're providing service to these students. So going into that career readiness, I talked and prepped a lot of our students for the big career fair that was last week. So a lot of them were excited about going and doing that. Translating their military skills and their military resumes into a civilian-friendly resume or language is a challenge for a lot of folks. It's also a big challenge for those that have a lot of experience working in workforce development, if you're not inside the bubble, to really understand that language, right? So we partner with some nonprofits. The VA also has some programs. But Hire Heroes USA, Hiring Our Heroes, off-base transition training is a training we bring here every year as well. So there's a lot of these opportunities that we have for our students to get that help translating their experience. One of the things that we notice is, they will lean in very heavy on the military jargon, both on LinkedIn and their resumes, things like that. In the next slide, I have a little bit of an example of that, but that's one of those things that we try to talk folks through. Same thing with interviews. There's a completely different skill set you have to do when you're sitting on a board for a military award or a military, some type of military board, rather than a civilian, interview, right? So if you have too much military bearing, you could come off as like a robot. Luckily, I was a rule breaker when I was in the military, and I grew my hair out too long and I had a horrible mustache. So I never had any problem with getting rid of that military bearing. I just never had any, basically. So being your authentic self is something that we try to support these students with doing. Now, I did love this photo. I left it in here because it's just a stock image I found, and somebody might look at this and be like, "Oh, that's great," but I look at this photo and I go, "This is awful." That is not a real uniform. We don't wear Henley t-shirts under our uniforms. It's missing badges and flags and name tapes and all these other things. The guy is unshaven. The haircut's not in regs. So, these are the things that if you're inside the bubble, you understand and pick up. But someone from the outside looking in is like, this is a great photo. We'll use this in our marketing. And it's like, no, you're not going to get, the kind of play that you want with it. So translating that military experience, right? So HR, whoever's doing those interviews, they're not going to know what a leading petty officer is, or a platoon sergeant, S3. There's a million other collateral duties that are listed on resumes that folks don't know anything about. And so one of those things we sit with them and talk to and have sessions about is, how do you translate that? So, this is actually a snippet from a version of my resume that I wrote quite a while ago. And so I took out the leading petty officer and put in clinic manager, right? So that is a more digestible term that an HR professional could understand. Field medical technician, it's still a little military-y, in there, but you don't want to say like combat medic. That doesn't play as well either. So that's where, that came in. A lot of resumes I'll see, they'll talk about the weapon systems they know, or how many miles of combat patrols they led. And we'll try to tell them to, or work with them on translating that into, civilian friendly language. So we really want to highlight technical leadership skills. You have a lot of young folks at an early age that are responsible for both people's lives and a lot of, a large inventory worth a lot of money, right? Those weapon systems, those equipment pieces, they cost all of us. They come out of our taxes. We have to be financially responsible with those pieces as well. So, um, another point that I'd like to bring up is training and awards in schools, those sort of things. I had a client when I worked at a nonprofit doing resumes for a short stint. I was really insistent that I put all of his military awards on his resume. And he was really, really insistent on having them listed and what they were for and when he got them. And I spent a day with him trying to explain that he was applying for a job as a personal trainer at Gold's Gym, and they did not care that he had a marksmanship ribbon, right? Like it just had no there was no reason for that to go on there. And tailoring that resume and knowing when to bring those things up is a skill that many of our student veterans work on, both with our office and folks like the Career Center. All right, so talking about the Career Center, they're our go-to partner, obviously. Opportunities like this session, basically. But we are partnering this year to bring back a military career fair. So we're doing that as a part of our Veteran Week programming this year. So we brought in connections with military employee relations groups, military TA groups, and military friendly employers to come bring them to campus and put them in front of our students. Off campus, our big partner is Veteran Bridge Homes. They're the big veteran service organization here in Charlotte. They actually were Charlotte Bridge Homes, if anybody remembers that in the past. But they are expanding their services into South Carolina, so they rebranded a little bit. We partner with them on basically everything when it comes to basic needs and veteran support. But one of the highest engagement teams that we work with over there is their employment team. And so Aaron Harper over there at Veteran Bridge Homes, and then the folks that work for him are constantly sending students over to us when they realize those students need some additional education or training to enter the workforce with what they want to do. Sorry, need a little water. So we work with advisors, academic advisors all across campus. A lot of these students will come to them first and explain to them what they want to do. And then those advisors kind of help them get into the right education path. I see a lot of advisors on the call. You guys know that, you don't just academic advise, you're social workers and counselors and all those things all combined. And so we're always happy to connect or work with y'all if you have a veteran student that needs a little bit more help or explaining how to, properly get their education here at Charlotte. And then the last little bit on this slide is our Student Veterans Association chapter. They do provide a lot of peer-to-peer support. So that's a big thing in our space, is a lot of peer-to-peer connection, mentoring. And in the military, one of those things that they tell you is, you work from the bottom up. You don't jump straight to the general and say, hey, I have a problem. You go to your peer first. And so that's where we want to have a lot of support for our students, is at that peer level. And then they can use that escalating triage ladder up to us. One thing that I've been pretty intentional about the last 2 years is trying to connect our alumni to our students. So these are the top two of those photos are from our welcome dinners that we do every semester. So Dr. Joseph Mulla is on that top photo there. He's a big VP in the finance sector here in Charlotte. So we brought him in to talk to our students. He got his DBA here at the university using his VA benefits, and kind of highlight a path for these students on, you can get into these high level of successful jobs, super high paying jobs, that sort of thing. The second photo there is Dick Beekman. He's now a lawyer and got his JD and an MBA at Wake Forest, but he was a former student body president here at Charlotte when he was using his VA education benefits as well. So we want to connect these students both for, mentorship in that alumni space, but also for, employer or career progression as well, right? So we know a lot of those jobs come from somebody knowing somebody, or, hey, we have an opening here, that sort of thing. So with Veteran Bridge Homes, that bottom photo down there, that was our last quarterly meeting for the Veteran Employee Relation Group meeting here in Charlotte. And so all those folks are from Bank of America, Duke Power, Coca-Cola, every consulting company ever known to man was there. I think Deloitte, RSM, and Eli, whatever that one is, they were all trying to fight for that front table there at the beginning of that meeting. So we try to get those students connected to these big companies to ease them in to that workforce. Because the overall goal is we want them to stay here in Charlotte, right? We want them to get a good job here. We know that they have less student loan debt. So if they become good alumni, they can donate back to the university, right? So it's a big kind of pipeline of we want to keep them here and engage within the city. So we're working with the University Advancement and Alumni Relations as well to kind of formalize an alumni group. There hasn't been one yet, and there's been a couple of efforts over the year, but I think in the next, hopefully by the end of this year, we'll be able to kind of get that done. All right. So backing up to our students again, that chart right there is the bottom of my website. So one of the things that I'm very intentional about doing is showing the work that my office does. Those 560 hours, those are my two certifying officials, Delicia and Nyesha's work, right? Takes the two of them 560 plus hours to do all that certification for our students. The economic impact of that is 15 million plus moved from the VA to our students for one semester. So every year, our office is helping facilitate about $30 million worth of money to these students. 4 to 5 million of that goes to the school directly for tuition and fees. The rest of that is going to the students, but a lot of that ends up trickling back to the university as well, right? So we have a large population of these students that are getting a stipend for education benefits that are then turning around and using that money to pay their tuition and fees. I don't have an exact science or number on that. One of these days, I really want to track that down and see what the exact amount is coming into Charlotte, but we can definitively say for one semester, $15 million moved from the VA to our students. You can also see on the bottom, that's our growth. So back in 2017, I first started in this office, we were at $799. And like I said, the numbers I ran this week were $1599. So we're going to tick over that 1600 any minute now. And I'll be extremely happy about it because I've been talking about 1600 for 2 years. So a lot of these students, these are the different education benefits they're using here. So like I talked a little bit about post 9/11 earlier, excuse me, the Montgomery GI Bill is the old one. Veteran readiness and employment is gaining a lot of popularity. It's a vocational benefit that the VA offers that will pay for education. And then down at the bottom, we have our National Guard Reserve and active duty also use Department of Defense funding for their education here on campus. All right, so now getting into the kind of nitty gritty and nerdy stuff about certifications, and I'll breeze through some of this. I don't want to bore everybody. But I just want to show the complexity of VA education benefits. So calculating out pay rates, how much the VA will pay, all these things is stuff that our office does because of how complicated these benefits are. The students come to us first with these questions, right? So, for any academic advisors in the room, some of them or most of them probably know students are motivated to get in-person classes because they will take a pay cut of about $1,000 a month by being fully online, right? So if they're fully online, they only get $1,005 a month while they're in school versus the $2,160 that the VA is paying them per month right now. If they're full-time, half-time, all these things, that rate of pursuit goes into this equation that the VA uses to pay them. There's also a lot of confusion with Department of Education standards versus VA standards. So, if you had a student that was in 12 credit hours for all of fall A, the school and Department of Ed might consider them full-time and give them a full Pell Grant, but the VA is only going to consider them full-time for those, 8 weeks that term goes. And then they would be out of benefits at that point. So these students come to us with a lot of complicated, weird questions. And I tell all campus partners, I don't expect you to know the answer. I just expect you to know to send them to us if you need to answer that question for a student. So post 9/11, Chapter 33, like I said earlier, pays all tuition and fees for the school. So that's all in-state tuition and fees. There is pretty much no reason that a student would need to pay out of state because our office runs 2 different in-state tuition and fee waivers. And then North Carolina just passed Senate Bill 118 about a month ago, and that's gone into effect to be a third way that no veteran would need to pay out-of-state tuition by going to a school in North Carolina. So we do a lot of work there, though, because the school gets a tax refund for every waiver we put on. So there is a lot of information that we have to collect and do stuff in Banner for these students. So GI Bill will also cover things like their matriculation fees, their major fees, and then for students using post 9/11, it will cover the basic health insurance plan for them as well. Like I said, it pays them $1,000 per year for books. So they usually get about 600 their first semester, and then they get the remainder of that 1,000. And then it pays them a housing allowance based on the zip code of the school, E5 with dependent rate. So all these links, you can click on them and look around and stuff. But basically, it pays them $2,160 a month, which is a lot higher because the cost of living in Charlotte has gone up a lot. But when I was a student, it was $1,200 a month. So we're at $2,160, much better, but still trying to keep up with cost of living here in the city. I will also say we are basically the highest housing allowance rate of any North Carolina school as well. So even Queens and Johnson C. Smith and some of the other schools that are in the city, theirs is a little bit lower than ours. But across the state, other than Elizabeth City, you're not going to have as generous of a housing allowance rate. Elizabeth City's is higher by $4. Not really sure why. I'm not involved in that discussion. So Chapter 31, that's that veteran readiness employment benefit I talked about. There was a little bit of panic last year when I was working with IR to do the IPEDS numbers. IPEDS wants to track tuition assistance for active duty and reserve, and then post 9/11 specifically. And I think it was Steve and I were talking. He was like, why is the money going up, but the number of post 9/11 students going down? Well, it's because they're switching over to this benefit. So to be eligible for veteran readiness employment, you need at least a 10% disability rating with the VA. It now no longer counts as an education benefit. So you could potentially use this, get your 4-year degree, and then save your post 9/11 for a master's or a PhD. So we're trying to, working with the grad school, hopefully keep those students here to continue their education. Since this benefit is for vocational purposes, it's tied to a disability rating. They'll cover things like, do you need a standing desk because you have a bad back? They will buy tech for students. So they usually will buy them a laptop and a printer. And then they cover all of their books through a purchase order directly to Barnes and Noble. And so students don't have to, they don't have to use the Niner course pack. They can keep their books as long as they want. Now, I have noticed, I got a little off topic in my own head there. I have noticed that less people want to keep books these days. And I think the Niner course pack works well in that sense. But for a lot of the older vets, they get weirded out that they'd have to turn their textbooks in. So it's always a fun discussion to have. Chapter 30 and 1606 are Montgomery GI Bill. So the Montgomery GI Bill, every year I've been doing this for the last 10 years. We've been told by the VA that they're going to phase it out and it will disappear and we'll never see it ever again. And then it still hasn't happened. And so even last year, the Supreme Court ruled on the Rudisill decision, which resurrected the Montgomery GI Bill. So a veteran had served two distinct periods of service with a break in between, and he had sued saying that he was owed two separate benefits. The Supreme Court sided with him. So now, if you're a veteran that served two distinct periods of service before and after 9/11, you have access to both of these benefits. So we have about 8 students using the old Chapter 30 right now here on campus. 1606 is those Reserve and National Guard students, and we have about 50 of them here using that benefit. So this is our big chunk right here, Chapter 35. This is tied to a student being a dependent of a veteran with a 100% disability rating from the VA. And so 100% disability rating with the VA doesn't mean you're bedridden. It doesn't mean you can't work, all those sort of things. It's just an accumulation of your various disability claims with the VA to get to that magic 100% number for them. So you will find a lot of veterans are at that number. They are being paid a nice little monthly check from the VA, but it also opens up an education benefit to anybody tied to them in their military service. So all of their kids and their spouses can use this benefit. There are no direct payments to us as a university. It pays those students directly, and then they turn around and pay that money to the university for tuition and fees. The Fry Scholarship was was created basically in response to Gunny Fry, who was actually a part of my unit, who was an EOD tech who passed away in the line of duty. And it's legislation to basically give the post 9/11 to a child of a service member that was killed in action. And so if you've heard the term yellow star or yellow ribbon, those sort of things, or gold star, it's for those gold star families, basically. So we have a couple of those students on campus that have a parent that passed away due to their military service, and they have access to the post 9/11. There is also a STEM extension. So the VA realized our students, as I told you earlier, we have a lot of these engineering students. It takes them longer than 120 credit hours to graduate. So the VA realized that, and this is a little stopgap. They will give them an extra 9 months of GI Bill benefits to help them graduate with a STEM degree. And then yellow ribbon, I will skip that. You guys don't need to know it. I'm not going to go over this slide. I know it's a wall of text, but this is the best way I could condense down the timeline for how VA certs are and money coming in for our students. And so these are all like little pieces of that, right? We have to certify anywhere from 30 to 90 days before term. The students' certs are coming in. We offer protective holds. There's just a lot of moving pieces in this. And so I want to tell you and kind of illustrate to you that it's very complicated. And if you have a student that's military affiliated come to you with concerns, it's not your job to explain this to them. Just send them over to us and we'll, get them through it. So it's a lot of moving pieces every single semester to get these students certified. All right, so things that we do as a university to support these students. So there are protective holds for any student using a benefit that a government entity is paying the school directly. So those post 9/11 students, Chapter 31 VR&E students, and then a lot of the state benefits we've actually been helping out with as well. We will offer protective holds either through student accounts or the bursar's office, or our office will put those holds on ourselves. And then we also have or encourage students that are living on campus to sign up for the payment plans. Even though that their tuition and fees are paid, it still helps them break up that remaining housing and meal plan fees for them. Did I go over? Nope, I didn't put that in that slide for some reason. We also do a priority registration. So UNC Charlotte actually wrote the language for it, and then it was adopted by President Hans a while back of UNC System Office. So 700.7.1 regulations on military success on campus for UNC System schools. Every school now in the system does priority registration for their military affiliated students. But it started here, and especially with the strong support of Dr. Reese, the registrar, helped us kind of push that through. So we know these students have a finite timeline on a finite benefit. So we want them to graduate on time, progress through without any issues. So they're registering with all the grad students after their first semester here at college. So some of the challenges we see in our students that are veterans, the non-traditional student population, there's a little bit of time away from the classroom, those sort of things, and integrating and whatnot back into the general campus can be tough. As I said earlier, though, our newest generation of student veterans is having less issue with that because of their age. And they have a less different lived experience than their peers. So they're integrating a lot better. There is that cultural and age difference can be an issue sometimes. I remember a class I was in, we were talking about something in South Korea, and an older veteran just kept talking about his deployment to Afghanistan. And I had to talk to him after class, like, again, this has no bearing to the topic, right? Like, let's keep it here and on topic here. So, sometimes we see that in some of our older students, but again, the students we have now are doing really, really good. Those new students, again, less family responsibilities and time commitments, but you see that a lot in that non-traditional student population. So students facing childcare issues, that sort of thing. We try to help out as best we can in the office. Military credit, joint service transcripts in different schools you've been to in the military often don't translate over well to college credit here. North Carolina System Office has been working on and launched a military equivalency system tool. Excuse me. And students are able to upload their JSTs and see what college credit they'll get for their experience at all UNC system schools. So that is something that we've been trying to also get a little bit more support and momentum on the faculty side, is to offer a little bit more competitive offerings there. Some of the smaller schools are kicking everybody's butts in what they will take as far as credit in that way. Myself, I worked in the medical field in the military. I came here to Charlotte in 2015, and I got 9 general elective credits from my military service. And so I was not going to start all over and go into that medical, CHHS and try to do all that. I didn't even get anatomy and physiology. I was like, I can put IVs and tourniquets on people in the dark while getting shot at. What do you mean I need to do A&P again? I get it. It's, we have to teach these students the way that they need to be taught. But what translates in is often not that much for our students. So I did want to touch on things like PTSD and TBI. There is a little bit of a trope that like veterans will have PTSD. Obviously, it's just the general public, can have levels of PTSD, and we don't know who our students are anyway or what they're dealing with. It doesn't have to be veteran specific. So I don't want to like pigeonhole that population and say, oh, veterans are walking around with PTSD. But there can be, due to their service, a higher rate of diagnosis in that population. So we work a lot with, University Disability Services and other offices to offer some workarounds for our students here. CAPS, CWP, all the wellness programs, we're very heavily integrated with those as well. So on campus, some of y'all have been to our space. This is the Veterans Lounge across the hall in Barnard. So this is Barnard 108. We luckily got a nice donation from Robert Q-Tub. He's an alum of the university. And so we were able to renovate this space really well. So there's a social side on one end, this picture that you're seeing right here. And then on the other side, there's our study space. So it's not 100% soundproof, but it's much better. And we find our students in there tutoring one another and doing homework and all this stuff all the time because they don't often want to go to the library or somewhere else on campus. So they'll use our space. I wish it was bigger and I could offer it to everybody, or all of our students. But currently we have to restrict it just to our veterans because of space and space constraints. And then the other thing we do offer in there is free printing. So I'm constantly spending money on these kids with their printing. It's like I bought a nice printer. The cartridge says 18,000 pages. 2 days later, they bring it back in. They're like, "We're out of ink." I'm like, "What are you guys doing?" They're printing textbooks in there, is what they're doing. So, all right. So, I want to highlight and hit on a couple of those resources. Like I said, we work a lot with CAPS. UCAE sponsors some veteran tutors that work in our space. So UCAE will do their timesheets and the training and get them all worked up and then station them basically in our veterans lounge for our students. So that has been a huge program over the last 2 years with Kimberly Rogers partnership. We do a mentoring program within our office called VEST. So that partners incoming students with a mentor who's been here for a year or two, and they're able to really get them connected to resources and be that first point of connection for troubleshooting for our students. And then I've talked about the rest of these orgs here over there. The picture here is the Veterans Park on campus. It's actually outside of Memorial Hall, which is where the ROTC building is. And so one of my longer term aspirations is to raise a bunch of money, knock that building down and build a bigger one and just put us all in one spot. So it would make sense that the Veterans Park would be there. But right now I'm like, those kids aren't in the military yet. And then the cadre are still active duty. So why is this here? But again, nobody asked me when they put that on campus. And we're coming up on time constraints, so I'll kind of get through some of this here. This once circles back to Elizabeth Beatty in my office and her outreach efforts. So we have 7 big installations. There are more than 7, but the 7 big ones here on campus or on North Carolina, excuse me, represent basically every branch. So we have Fort Bragg up in Fayetteville. Seymour Johnson is Air Force Base, kind of in the middle of the state there. And then Camp Lejeune has Navy and Marine Corps across both of those installations, Lejeune and Cherry Point Air Station down there. So we are talking to everybody from every branch, basically, when we go to these things. Elizabeth goes to all their career fairs and education fairs to kind of advertise Charlotte to them. And, you know, we've been doing numbers with that. We've stolen a lot of students out of Fayetteville State because they don't have very strong STEM programs, especially with the engineering. Our 2 student orgs, they're doing great. You know, the SVA, Student Veterans of America, that group has really kind of grown a lot here on campus. And the Military Women's Alliance is filling a really good spot for a niche population, like a subgroup of a subgroup. And so they're all doing really good work in the space, engaging with these students. So one of those things that this is kind of what I end a lot of my slides with folks is, you know, like, what can you do, like an action step at the end? And a lot of you that work with our student veterans know these things already, and a lot of it's inherent to just working with students. But I would encourage you not to treat anybody different or special because of their veteran service or their military service. You know, there are a lot
Hey,
of
Chris, can you speak a little more directly into the mic?
Sorry.
Thank you.
A lot of our veteran students will their military service. We don't want that to be their only like personality point. Basically, is we want them to be proud of it and be a part of their fabric of their experience, but not be the only thing that they lean on as far as their identity here on campus. A lot of those assumption avoiding things, you know, again, like I said, a lot of deployments have dried up. And so most of our veteran students here on campus have not deployed at this time. So, you know, that some of them can feel a certain type of way if you assume that they have deployed. The one I really want to talk about here, though, is, you know, if you're having a problem with them in class, Or as far as using a service, just be really direct with them. Most of them are used to that kind of more blunt, direct feedback. And we've found that and putting that out to people as a communication strategy is just one of a best practice for working with our students. And again, if you have anything or a question or need to loop us in, always happy to work with y'all. Just send us a G chat, send us an email, let us know how we can help. And apologies for not speaking into the mic a couple of times, but now I want to save the last couple of minutes for questions.